Imagine a dorm room. The smell of stale coffee, books piled on the table, a large, clumsy machine making noise nearby, which at the time seemed like the pinnacle of technology. Two friends are sitting next to each other. One thin guy in big glasses is typing quickly on the keyboard. The other is staring intently at the screen, as if at a map of the future. They don't yet know that their names will become legends. They are just dreaming. This is a story about more than just business. It's a story about spirit, about how courage and belief in your own ideas can change the lives of millions. And today I want to tell it to you as if we were sitting together in the kitchen. Because at the end of this story, you'll find not just facts, but 5 lessons that could be your own key to the future. But first, let's go back to the 70s. At that time, computers seemed like something out of science fiction. Huge cabinets with light bulbs that cost tens of thousands of dollars, and almost no one could afford them. And here are two guys, Bill and Paul, sitting and dreaming. What? How can we make computers accessible to everyone? Bill Gates and Paul Allen, two friends from Seattle. They spent hours talking about technology, about the future, about the code that could change the world. And one day they heard about a new product, the Altair computer. Small, primitive, but affordable. And it was he who became that spark. They wrote a program for it. A few lines of code, but those lines changed everything. Imagine this moment. A dark room. The screen lights up with symbols, and suddenly the machine begins to obey the human. It was like magic. And that's when Microsoft was born. Not a big corporation. Not the richest company in the world. But a small startup with a name handwritten on paper. An idea that was bigger than its creators themselves. Because back then, everything was simple. 2 guys and a dream. A dream that sounded almost naive. To make sure that every home had a computer. And no one but them believed that it was possible. When a dream is still fragile, the world tests its strength. And that's exactly what happened with Microsoft. Their first success with the Altair program was like the first spark. It caught fire, and people appeared around who looked at it as a miracle. Ordinary users were delighted. Friends and clubs shared the news. But along with it came a shadow. Their code began to be copied, distributed without permission, given away as a toy. Imagine this moment. You sit up at night, your eyes burning from the monitor. You can't taste coffee anymore. You create lines of code, each of which is like your own child to you. And then you come to the club and see. Your work is lying on someone else's desk, copied on a floppy disks, given away for free. Everyone is smiling. Everyone is happy, except you. For the young guys, it was like a punch in the chest. They didn't have the money yet. They didn't have the influence yet. And the only thing they had was the code. And that's what started to slip away. Bill Gates couldn't take it anymore. He sat down at his typewriter and wrote a letter. His words were sharp, almost desperate. If software is always free, who will continue to make it? How will we live and work? This was not a cold business document. This was a cry from the heart. This was the moment when he showed the world. Microsoft would not give up its dream without a fight. Meanwhile, reality was harsh. A small office that looked more like a warehouse. Chairs that creaked with every movement. A phone that rang infrequently. A few people who believed, and dozens who laughed. There wasn't even enough money for a decent meal. Paul joked that their diet was coffee and pizza, and that should be enough to keep them afloat. But it wasn't the money that hurt the most. It was the doubts that hurt. They heard them everywhere. Some said, "This isn't a business, this is a game." Others said, "Computers will never become mainstream." Sometimes these voices were even heard among friends. Imagine an evening in that office. Outside the window is night, around the empty streets of Seattle. Inside is a lamp that gives off yellow light and casts long shadows on the walls. Mountains of paper, pizza crumbs, half-drunk cans of Coke. Paul sits with tired eyes, and Bill, barely blinking, looks at the screen. And suddenly he says quietly but firmly, "We won't stop. This is just the beginning." And in that moment, everything becomes clear. When the whole world doubts, you have to hold on to your dream even tighter. When you are being robbed, you have to create even more. And when it seems like there is no way out, it is actually just a new level of challenge. That's how Microsoft emerged from its first crisis. Not with a victory, but with a lesson. A lesson that defined their fate. Crisis is not the end, it's the fuel. And it was this belief that opened the door to their next big step. Because very soon, in a cramped negotiation room, a young guy in glasses will say words that will turn the industry upside down. Imagine an office that smells of polished wood and expensive cigars. Big tables, dark suits, cold looks of people who consider themselves masters of the industry. These were negotiations with IBM, the giant of the computer world. In their hands was power, in their hands was money. And against them, a young guy with two big glasses and a voice that was still a little broken from excitement. Bill Gates sat across from them, talking about software. He spoke calmly, but there was a confidence in every word that surprised these stern businessmen. He was only 25, and he had the audacity to say to a giant corporation, "We can give you an operating system." At that moment, he didn't have the system yet. It was a risk. It was a leap over the abyss. But it's these kinds of steps that make history. After this deal with IBM, MS-DOS was born. A simple, even primitive system, but it was the foundation. Thousands of computers across America began to run on what a small team from Seattle had created. Imagine the contrast. Just yesterday, they were a group of dreamers in a stuffy office with pizza and half-eaten hamburgers. Today, their code was running machines that bought banks, factories, schools. Little lines written at night became the heart of the computer revolution. It wasn't just a business success. It was a symbol that two friends could dictate the rules of an industry where yesterday they were nobody. And although there was more money now, the work remained endless. Days and nights turned into one flow. The windows in the offices were lit up even at 2 in the morning. The room was filled with the clatter of keyboards, the smell of coffee was in the air, and diagrams of future programs were hanging on the board. They did not stop because they understood. The moment when fortune smiles, you cannot miss. And that's when a new level of dream was born. Now it wasn't just about making a program. Now the ambition was, every home should have a computer, and every computer should run our software. In those years, Microsoft was not yet a giant, but it was then that it became a force to be reckoned with. And this force only grew. But a success story never comes without challenges. Because along with the first big victories came the first blows that almost broke the company. In the 90s, Microsoft was no longer a small team. It was no longer a cramped office with a lamp and pizza boxes. It was a multi-story building, hundreds of employees, and a new dream that was now ringing loud. To make sure that every person on the planet had their own window to the world. That's how Windows came about. Imagine what it was like. People turned on their computers and no longer saw a black screen with command prompts. Instead, they saw colorful windows, familiar icons, a world where anyone could operate a machine without any special knowledge. The Windows boot sound became a symbol of a new era. It was like magic. You press a button, and suddenly the computer opens up a whole new space in front of you. Microsoft took off. Windows and Office were distributed by the millions. Every office, every school, every government agency had their products running. They became more than just a company. They became the standard. And that was both a blessing and a curse. Because with the victories came the first serious setbacks. When you get too big, the world starts looking at you differently. In the 1990s, Microsoft was called a monopoly. They were accused of stifling competitors, of crowding out everyone else's software, of trying to control an entire industry. Lawsuits began. Newspaper headlines were like, Microsoft versus the world. Picture the scene. A courtroom, long tables, mountains of documents, reporters' cameras flashing with every movement. And in the middle of it all, Bill Gates, sitting under interrogation, answering sharp questions, his eyes showing a tired stubbornness. For him, this was not just a legal matter. It was a matter of honor, a matter of the company's future. The blow was painful. The reputation was damaged. The company was forced to pay huge fines. And this was the moment when Microsoft could have broken down, when the entire machine that had been built for years could have crumbled. But something else happened. They used this crisis as a point of rebirth. This is where the new Microsoft began to be born. Not the one that was simply a monster with money and influence, but the one that began to seek a balance between power and responsibility. They survived painful blows, but they did not lose the main thing, the ability to build further. And here was born the second great lesson of this story. Sometimes failure doesn't destroy you. It purifies you. It forces you to reconsider yourself and take a step into a new era. And it was this lesson that led Microsoft to the next stage, where new products, new victories, and new disappointments awaited them. Because after the greatness of Windows and Office, something new appeared on the horizon, and the world began to change faster than ever. In the early 2000s, Microsoft was on top of the world. Their products worked everywhere, in schools, universities, banks, hospitals, even in military structures. Windows became not just a program, but a synonym for a computer. When you turned on your machine, you turned on Microsoft. And it seemed that this story was already decided. They won forever. But history never ends where it seems. For it is in moments of greatest strength that the greatest challenges arise. The world began to change, and change came from places not expected. Microsoft tried to conquer new territory. They created the Xbox, a console that challenged Sony and Nintendo. And although no one believed that a software company could fight in the world of games, they did it. Gamers felt as if a giant, always associated with offices and spreadsheets, suddenly learned to speak the language of entertainment and drive. Xbox became a symbol that Microsoft could change shape without losing power. They solidified Office, making it the heart of businesses around the world. They built new services, tried the cloud, experimented with ideas that seemed far from their classic model. But then the world suddenly turned in a direction that Microsoft didn't notice. Smartphones appeared. At first it was a fun toy, but very quickly it became a revolution. Apple with the iPhone showed that a computer could now be in your pocket. Google with its Android made it available to millions. And this is where Microsoft was late. They tried to break into this market. Windows Phone, the partnership with Nokia, advertising campaigns with loud slogans. But the reality was cruel. People had already chosen their favorites, and Microsoft, which had been the king of the industry for decades, suddenly looked alien and slow. The huge corporation that had once dictated the rules was now trying to catch up and not having time. Imagine this drama from the inside. Giant offices, thousands of employees, endless meetings. Someone shouts, "We can still win." Someone wearily says, "The world has moved on." Ballmer, the then head, was energetic, loud. He believed in the fight, but he lacked a vision of the new world. And gradually Microsoft was turning into a symbol of the past. The company that once opened the door to the future risked losing everything due to its own inertia. And it is here that the moment comes that determines everything in any story, the moment of choice. Whether to stay in the comfortable past, holding on to old victories, or to change completely, risking losing yourself but getting a chance at a new life. This choice was painful for Microsoft, but it paved the way for the next big transformation. Because a new leader was already appearing on the horizon, who came not just to lead the company, but to breathe a new soul into it. His name was Satya Nadella. In 2014, a quiet revolution took place at Microsoft. Satya Nadella took the helm, and the world saw a completely different company, not just a tech giant, but an organism that is learning to breathe with the world. His arrival was not a loud show. There was no fanfare and expensive presentations. There was a simple but powerful message. We have not missed the chance. We are reborn. Imagine an office in Redmond. Thousands of people are sitting at their desks. The air is filled with the smell of coffee, the clatter of keyboards, and quiet conversations. Satya walks into the room. looks at everyone, and says a simple word, change. And the word seems to fill the air with energy. People understand that things are different now. Microsoft is no longer just creating programs. It's creating the future. The first step was unexpected and bold. The company bet on the cloud. Azure, a project that at first seemed like a risk, became the heart of a new era. Imagine server rooms that glow like small cities, processing millions of pieces of data, all controlled by a software intelligence created by people who once wrote code in their dorm rooms. Then came the big acquisitions. LinkedIn, GitHub, the partnership with OpenAI. These weren't just business moves. They were symbols that Microsoft was no longer afraid to take risks. They showed that the company could learn from its mistakes and turn past failures into opportunities for the future. And it is at this time that a new image of the company appears. The once vast but closed world now opens its doors to people. Technologies that seemed complex and inaccessible become simple. Clouds, artificial intelligence, platforms for developers. All this is turning into tools that help people realize their dreams. But the biggest challenge is not technology. The biggest challenge is to change the mindset of the company and the people who work in it. To change cultures, to teach them to look forward, not backward. To survive the years when failures hurt more than victories bring joy. And in this struggle, Nadella becomes not just a leader, but a symbol of faith in the possibility of a new beginning. Today, Microsoft is not just a corporation. It is an organism that breathes with the world, learns, changes, and influences the lives of millions of people. And if you imagine this company as a person, you will see it has gone through all the difficulties, survived defeats, and was born again stronger. Because the main lesson of this stage is simple. True strength is not in standing still after victory, but in finding the courage to change and turn crises into new opportunities.